15 years ago, I'd go and talk to people about VC investments or angel investments, and everyone would be like, what is that? What are you even talking about? Fast forward 15 years later, it is actually a place that governments are paying attention to, corporates are looking at. We've seen some great success stories out of the region as well.
How do you see MENA as a region evolving in this global AI race?
Trade Deals has been pretty intelligent. It's positioning the MENA region ahead of a lot of the markets around the world. We'll see a very thriving ecosystem, a lot more funding that's available, great founders, second, third time founders working on great companies. Hopefully see a decacorn or two, a lot of IPOs and public companies in the market that are tech related. Hi, my name is Hassan Haider. I'm a GP at Plus VC, and you're listening to the Innovation and Civilization podcast.
All right, Hassan Haider, welcome to the Innovation Civilization podcast. What a great pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So Hassan, let's get to it then. So what is exactly Plus VC, and what's your core fund thesis? What are you guys doing there in the Middle East?
Sure. So Plus VC is a seed and pre-seed stage focused venture capital firm that invests really at the earliest stages of startups across the Middle East and North Africa. We're sector agnostic, but what we try to do is we try to be the first institutional money into a deal and support founders at the earliest stages. That's kind of our thesis. The MENA region is a growing market, but it's still very nascent. So a lot of the time, our role is kind of being the first believers and putting in the first check where other people tend to follow after that.
And what's your sort of average check size you're doing?
Currently, we're investing around $100,000 per deal. We've done 99 investments so far.
Wow, that's brilliant. How big is your fund? Is it something like 60 million or something, or?
Yeah, we closed fund one just under $20 million.
Oh, okay. That's brilliant. And when you say pre-seed, is that pre-product as well, or how does it work basically for you?
So I guess the definitions are different in MENA than in the US. So typically, even a pre-seed, a startup will probably have a product, maybe not customer usage, but they'll kind of have something to show us. Or there'll be a pretty solid team that have done things before together. At seed, typically here, startups already have a product. They usually have some customer usage and also revenues, which in Silicon Valley is unusual for a seed stage company. So a little different.
Why do you think that difference arises? Is it because people want more credibility before they put in institutional money for an idea? Versus founders who've got no product and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a symptom of a very nascent ecosystem. I think here it's a bit more difficult to fundraise, and so if you have something to show, it's much easier for investors to then jump on top of that and be like, oh, okay, you've launched a product, you've been able to execute, we can put in a bit of money to help you grow further.
That's really interesting. And do you typically find sort of angels kind of invested already in some of these, kind of startups you invest in, or is it more like literally you guys would, be the first institutional money?
It's both. So sometimes angels would have come in before us, maybe an accelerator before us. Sometimes we're the first institutional money in. The founders have bootstrapped their way to us. So it depends.
I see. Okay, cool. And did you say that you guys made almost close to 100 investments so far?
Yeah, we have. So we started investing in summer of 2020. And since then, we had our first closing of the fund in July 22. And over the past 3 years, we've done about 100 investments.
That's really amazing. And how sort of involved are you in the day-to-day of these 100 companies? Do you take board seats, and would you directly talk to the founder about the strategy and the product direction, so on and so forth? How hands-on are you guys?
So look, our role as a VC, I understand very clearly, is we're providing capital and we're providing advice selectively where it's needed. So we're not geniuses, right? We don't know. We're not experts in every single company in every single sector. What we're really doing is we're looking for founders that we believe can execute with or without us, and we're able to help them with a little bit of capital. And then in key areas, we can help them with inflection points where they're looking at specific issues or concerns that they're coming across for the first time, but we've seen, because of our large portfolio, several times things like that have happened. And so we don't like get super involved and like tell them what to do, because that's stupid. Like, why would we invest in someone that we think really knows what they're doing and then tell them what to do? But what we do is we're there as often as they need us. So if they want to talk to us every week, we're available. At least on a quarterly basis, we do connect with every company that's there. And we help where we can. So whether it's fundraising introductions, whether it's support with hiring, whether it's things like PR or legal or whatever. So the team as a whole can help quite a bit with the portfolio companies, and it works out pretty well.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. Like when I talk to especially fund managers who are in a more nascent kind of market, they tend to do cross stage as well, basically all the way towards a later private equity play as well, and so on and so forth. So do you feel the need for something like that, or are you guys happy to play where you are?
We're happy. We're very happy where we are. We like being the first money in. We like being early. We like our decision making to be based on, we love this team, we want to back them and see where they go. When it goes to later stages where it's private equity, it becomes there's no emotion left, and it's all numbers and stuff, and it's not as much fun for investors like me. And so, and the skill sets are very different. Like finding someone that's good, like solid fundamental quality that you think is going to build a great company versus, looking at inefficiencies in the financials and where to cut costs and what to do and all these things. They're different skill sets. So I wouldn't do a multi-stage fund. Our focus is really on the earlier stages.
Yeah. So what do you guys typically look for in a founder? I know like generally, like when you say picking great companies, especially, here in the West, you obviously look at the founder, your team, and then the idea and so on and so forth. Is there anything different apart from that, or as an addendum to that? Because of the Middle Eastern region is a bit nascent, you sort of look for, or like is it all the same?
It's the same. You're kind of investing and betting in people as a venture capitalist. And so our thesis is to find founders that we believe have a bias towards execution. So they're just going to get things done. Like we see a lot of founders that walk around with pitch decks for 6 months, a year. They're trying to fundraise, and you ask them, what have you done? Oh, we're still raising. Okay, but you could have done some other things in the meanwhile. And then there's other founders where we talk to them 1 month and we talk to them next month. They're like, oh, remember that thing you told me when we spoke a month ago? We already implemented that. We tested it. It works really well. Thank you so much for that comment. And I was like, what comment? I forgot that I even mentioned that. So that's the difference. So we're looking for founders that really have this, are just going to get things done, a bias towards execution. And that's really, I've found to be the differentiating factor between success and failure. And it's not like, sometimes you have these signals where like which university did someone study at or where did they work before and stuff like that. Those signals don't really exist here in the MENA region as much because people don't have opportunities to go to like Stanford all the time or whatever. But there's still great founders here. And so those signals throw out the door. It really is just, you're looking for signals about execution. And generally here it's a bit easier because at seed stage, they've launched a product, they've got some customers, usually some revenues. And so you can use that to understand really what their founders are capable of.
So one thing in like, at least the Western markets, we sort of look at pre-seed is like, are you like YC backed? Did you make it to YC and so on and so forth? So is there anything equivalent to that in the MENA region? Or
no, not really. I mean, YC is YC everywhere in the world, right?
Correct, so
we've had some startups where we invested in them and then YC came in after us, which was quite nice. That helps. But the YC boost here in MENA doesn't help the startups as much because the funding ecosystem isn't there. Like a startup graduating for YC comes to the region and tries to raise YC valuations, generally will have a hard time. And so you've got to take local sort of understanding into account. But YC is the gold standard for everywhere around the world. There isn't really a gold standard program the same way, but there's a lot of good programs that are operating in the region. You've got Flat Six Labs is probably one of the regional programs that have done really well. They've grown and scaled across the region as well. Homegrown sort of accelerator programs, and there's quite a lot of them. So accelerators do exist. They have a role to play in building out the ecosystem, but there's not the same sort of golden stamp that this company is much better than all the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair, really. Take every company by the merits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every founder by the merits and so on and so forth. I'm quite curious to do like a deep dive into the MENA kind of startup landscape. So you started off leading an angel investment network, as I understand, in Bahrain, helping entrepreneurs many, many years ago, right? Well, probably 2 decades ago or so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, about 15 years ago.
Yeah. So obviously a lot has changed in the region since then.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the region is at an inflection point when it comes to the change in the startup of the ecosystem? There, like, what's changed? Give us like for those of us who are not living there, give us the vibe basically of the startup ecosystem. Yeah.
It's quite an active ecosystem now. So right now, there's a lot more funds that are looking at venture capital investments. A lot of government entities are looking at venture capital and technology investments. It's become a thing that people are paying attention to. 15 years ago, I'd go and talk to people about VC investments or angel investments, and everyone would be like, "What is that? What are you even talking about?" And I'd talk to them. I'd be like, "Look, we'll take investments with founders and take minority stakes," and they're like, "How much are the founders putting in?" And they're like, "Nothing." And you're like, "We're putting all the money?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, so we own the majority?" Like, no, the majority's still theirs. Like so it, it was a whole thing. Pretty interesting learning process. And everyone would be like, "Why should I invest with you? I'll just put it into a real estate or a building or a factory that I can touch and feel." There was almost no activity at the time. I was a crazy person running around saying, "This is going to happen. We need to be active and we need to be part of it." And then fast forward 15 years later, it is actually a place that governments are paying attention to, corporates are looking at, and we've seen some great success stories out of the region as well. So, Careem got acquired by Uber. We had the Jahez IPO. We've got a bunch of IPOs that are lined up for the Saudi market as well. So it's showing that it's really a valuable asset class in itself. Right now, it's still much lower valuations in Silicon Valley in general, although there's a few weird hotspots that don't quite make sense. But other than that, I think when you look at the whole world, I think this is probably the best place to be investing in terms of startups right now. So you have a lot of growth potential. Funding is starting to develop there. Exit potential is coming down the line with a bunch of IPOs. So it really is a very up and coming, very active ecosystem to be involved in. Unlike other places where it's probably a bit more subdued.
Yeah, and exits are always interesting. Basically, if you're an LP putting in a lot of money, you're basically thinking about, okay, how do I get my money out? I mean, obviously there's a lock-in period there with VC, but are you saying that the exits you're seeing right now are in line with traditional sort of IPOs and public market or acquisitions and so on and so forth, and that's quite clear and easy for every single of these countries like Bahrain, Saudi, and UAE?
So if you asked me 15 years ago where the exits are going to come from, I'd be like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Right?
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe mergers and acquisitions, maybe whatever. But now it's quite clear. So as seed stage investors, I know that I can exit my companies, at least my stake, at secondary. So there's a lot of secondary activity that's taking place when a startup gets to $100 million plus. The later stage investors in the region try to acquire as much ownership as possible. So we've sold quite a bit of secondaries, locked in 50Xs, which has been really great for us as a fund. So that is a pretty active ecosystem. And unlike the US, where VC funds had restrictions related to secondary activity, in MENA, we don't have that sort of restriction. So a lot of the larger funds were very actively acquiring stakes through secondaries as well. And then what happened just a few years ago is we saw the first big sort of tech IPO in the region was Jahez. They IPO'd at a couple of $1 billion in the Saudi market. There's a lot of demand for that. And then it triggered a lot more companies, especially a lot of more tech companies, to start looking at the Saudi market as a potential IPO market. So I have probably 4 or 5 companies that are all at the stage where they're a couple $100 million in valuation, and they're all preparing for IPO in Saudi. I got one that's looking at IPO in the UAE. one that's looking at the Egyptian market. So the stock markets have become a path for exit for a lot of startups. We have seen really great activity on that front, and I think liquidity's there. There's demand. A lot of pre-IPO funds have been set up for specifically these startups to be able to get them to the IPO. So
Yeah.
that's working.
That's quite interesting, actually, and especially the maturity of the stock market activity that you mentioned, the public markets.
I mean, it's not mature, but like activity is there.
I see. The reason I say it is because you'd see, even today, a lot of Chinese companies listing on the NASDAQ or NYSE, right? So you don't really see that in that region, like the top companies, they're still listing locally, basically.
So about listing in NASDAQ and other global markets, actually, it turns out that the Saudi market will probably give you a higher premium than in other markets as well. And there's quite a lot of liquidity in the Saudi market as well. And one of the largest IPOs were in the world was the Talabat IPO on the Dubai Stock Exchange. So there is a lot of liquidity and a lot of demand in the region. And I think you're seeing these pushes to have deeper capital markets. So I don't think a lot of startups are looking at NASDAQ or whatever now because actually they're getting better valuations or more liquidity and an easier process listing on the local exchanges.
That's really interesting. So that's the other end of the spectrum when it comes to exit. What about the earlier kind of ecosystem fundamentals that you need? Are there like opportunities and quite clear rules and regulations for people to start companies and basically ways and they can get started and with the right training and so on and so forth? If you're a founder there, like, is it easier? Like, how does it sort of mature over the last 15 years? Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward to set up a company now across most markets. And generally what we're seeing is Abu Dhabi ADGM has become one of the preferred jurisdictions for startups to set up and set up. So it's like become the Delaware of the MENA region.
Right.
Is ADGM. And so it's become pretty easy and straightforward. I mean, there's still a bit of hiccups here and there. Opening bank accounts takes a bit of time and stuff. But in general, I think we don't really have much complaints when it comes to the way it is set up right now.
That's brilliant. And I always sort of wondered about this region. Like, do you see companies which are like not copies of the West? So like Kareem is like MENA Uber, right? And I'm sure there's an equivalent to DoorDash and Deliveroo as well. Are you seeing more of that, or are you sort of seeing also quite unique kind of companies basically which don't have an equivalence to the West basically?
I think it's a combination of both. So when you look at the MENA region, you've got to take into account that we didn't really have the Web 1.0 companies, the eBays and the Amazons and stuff. Those didn't really exist. Sure. We jumped straight into the mobile web, and most people, the first time they interacted with anything on the online was through their phones here in the region. And so there's a lot of gaps and a lot of opportunities to fill in those gaps with, copycats of things that already exist in the rest of the world. So you can kind of see, this worked there, it'll kind of work here. With localization is very important. You got to understand language, you got to understand culture and all these sort of things. So that's a given. But we are seeing a lot of really cool companies that are setting up here and are competing globally as well. So SaaS startups that have born out of Egypt or Dubai or whatever, competing on a global scale. And so both really are parts of, and neither should be discounted. There's opportunities in both areas. I think that's one of the reasons why I really love region, is because there's just so many surface level opportunities that just haven't been touched yet. And so every opportunity is a great startup to invest in.
I was quite interested when you mentioned about some companies domiciled there, which are competing on a global level. I sort of used to think that when you're kind of looking at investing in companies in that region, your TAM, or total available market, is basically like just the region, right? Or the kind of Arabic speaking world. But you're saying that you're seeing a few of these companies which compete globally. Do you have any sort of concrete examples just for the audience of some of these wonderful companies and what are they doing?
Yeah, sure. So I was an early investor in a company called Callow. They recently raised around about $50 million. They just expanded into the UK out of the region. So
Right.
they're one
What
of
do they
the
do?
few, they're basically a meal plan subscription service. So you go on Callow, it's a really easy service, subscribe, and your meals get delivered to you every day. And you don't have to think about it again. Not like Blue Apron where you have to cook it. It's cooked and just microwave it and you can eat it. So not rocket science, but amazing execution, great customer experience, all of that led to them like really scaling, and they're doing really, really well. And then they acquired a couple of companies out of the UK that were doing something similar and now have expanded into the UK. Flowered, similar company. They do online flower delivery. They are delivering in the UK and other markets as well. So that's on the B2C side. On the B2B side, we've seen companies like Gameball, which is a gamification startup, integrate with companies all around the world. It's a SaaS sort of platform. App is another company where it's a restaurant reservation management system, and they have operations globally as well. Even though they're based here, they compete head to head with, Seven Rooms and some of the other guys that are there. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of examples, and I'm sorry for anyone that I've invested in that I haven't mentioned, but there's quite a lot of examples of that.
Yeah.
And so that does exist. The MENA region as a whole is a large market. It's 350 million people speaking the same language, which is about the same size as a population as the US. It's not a homogenous market, but it is same language, similar cultures. It's much more homogenous than Southeast Asia, for instance.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, so you're based in Bahrain. Say a company basically gets started in Bahrain. Like, when you say it's not fully homogenous, right? Like when you expand into some of these other markets, say like Egypt, which is considered Africa. So like, is that like quite easy to do? Like when I say heterogeneous, it is, How is it like? Yeah.
It's not easy, but it is doable, and it's not impossible. So it's like, if you're good at doing it, you're going to do really well. If you're bad at doing it, forget it. So that's why Korean was able to expand into so many different markets. They did a really good job in their expansion in the basis of expanding in land and expand into each market. So it's an obstacle, but it's not impossible, and it's not super easy. So it's somewhere in the middle. So put in the right effort and you'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
Or there are markets where, like within the GCC, it's easier. For instance, from Bahrain to Saudi, it's a 30-minute drive to Saudi across a causeway. So it's like a very easy sort of jump there, and very similar cultures and language. Whereas an interesting fact is that UAE to Saudi is a harder jump, even though it's still part of the GCC. It's because the markets are very different. Startup has probably had majority English-speaking market. It's mostly expats, whereas Saudi is majority Arabic-speaking, mostly locals. And so if you try to market in Saudi the same way you do in the UAE, you're going to fail miserably. And there were some startups that did that. So there were a couple of examples, 5-6 years ago, where a startup from the UAE went and plastered up and down sort of the main roads in Riyadh, banners all in English, and they got zero return on investment because it just wasn't a thing that people really read when they were going up and down. And they did, it worked really well in the UAE, but it did not work at all in Saudi. So, these are all little things you've got to take into account, but it works. It's not a impossible thing. Egypt to Saudi is not a difficult one as well. There's a lot of similarities within those markets. Arabic speaking, large market, local first. So there are similarities in lots of ways to expand and scale.
Yeah, that's quite exciting, really. We talked about the bull case, I guess, of the MENA. It's a great market, 350 million people, roughly the same language. It's obviously a very young population as well, right? And quite hungry sort of consumers out there. So a lot of appetite, a lot of things to build. If you're to steelman the bear case, basically, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now that entrepreneurs or kind of allocators like yourself face right now that you would love to neutralize, basically, or someone needs to neutralize?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues is availability of capital. Although everyone thinks, oh, it's the MENA region, there's a lot of money.
Yeah,
When you look at
crude
the
oil
total
money.
amount of, yeah, but that's not the case for venture capital in the region. When you look at
Interesting.
the total amount of funding that took place, I think the high was in 21, 2, maybe something like that. It was $3 billion across all of the markets, $3 billion, which was invested in VC in the region. That's not a lot. That's like what a small market in Europe does in VC on an annual basis. So we're still really, really early on that stage. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is it is still a really nascent market. Things are just getting started. And then the second part of it is there's not a lot of LPs that are committing to VC funds that are focused on the MENA region. There's a lot of funding here that goes into real estate, into construction, into all these other things. But when it comes to VC, they probably have invested in Silicon Valley, but VC in MENA is something that it's more difficult to convince. And so, yeah, we don't really have a huge LP base across the region.
Yeah.
And a lot of the sovereigns maybe are too big for the smaller funds that are operating in the VC space, where our funds are $100, $200 million in size. They're like their minimum commitment's $100 million. So, it doesn't quite match, right? So that's one of the things. So we really, although it seems like, the streets are paved with gold here, when it comes to VC, not so much. And the second thing that's really something that would be good to just take into account is everyone is still learning, and that includes investors. And so there are some crazy things that do happen when it comes to valuations, when it comes to things like that, but it's all a learning process, I think, more than anything. And, everyone always thinks about, the worst case scenario, which is war. And,
Correct.
that's something that is unavoidable. It's not something I can have any control over. But in general, I think when you look at the overall political stability across the MENA region, majority of the markets are really solid, are very stable, don't really have any issues. I think there's more issues in some countries in the West than there are here. So for me, it's just one of those things where sometimes there will be wars that might happen, but in general, that's not going to affect what we do.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of been
Of
the
course.
case.
Yeah. I'm just wondering about the first point you mentioned, which is capital availability. Obviously, that's a quite interesting one. I am seeing more kind of, I guess, some of that crude oil money, which is kind of put for risk capital, actually go into VCs which are domiciled in the West, right? Basically, versus, putting in actual money in MENA VCs, so on and so forth. I was just curious to know from your perspective, because you talk to a lot of fund managers in that region, what sort of return multiples of a fund are you guys sort of getting, basically? And how does that compare with the Western funds and so on and so forth? Is there some analysis that's made? Are you getting some crazy 5x's instead of a 1.5 or 2x? What's
I think in general, what we're seeing is the region is one of those markets where it's getting started. So there's a lot of opportunity that's there. So what I like to think about is, look, in MENA, there's opportunities lying on the surface, and you just need to pick them up, run with them, and execute well. Whereas in markets like the US, the surface level opportunities have all been taken and they've all been succeeded. There's big companies that are already doing those things. So in order for you to generate a return, you have to go, niches of niches of niches, or frontier. And that's the way you're going to generate a return as a VC. You've got to really dig down into something really niche or something that's so frontier to generate these massive returns and outsized returns. We don't have to do that in the region. It's much easier. And so in general, speaking to most of the fund managers, they're my friends and stuff, we're seeing pretty good returns when you compare them against global medians. Majority of the funds that are in the region are actually top quartile in terms of their performance. You're seeing 3-4x's in general. Some later stage funds probably around 1 to 1.5 to 2x, but the earlier stage funds are able to hit 3x and 4x quite comfortably. That's what we're aiming for. We're targeting about a 4x net fund for our investors. And so that's kind of it's more risky, but we're seeing a bigger upside because there's just these opportunities that are easy to pick up.
Yeah, that makes sense, really. I want to get to some more kind of sector specific questions, shall we say. So one thing that currently the whole world is taken by a spin is basically the rise of LLMs and AI and LLMs since the launch of ChatGPT. So how do you guys see investing in sort of AI and LLMs and so on and so forth? Like, what sort of things are you guys investing in? Is it also foundational model type companies, or is it more app layer, or is it stuff in the middle, or is it infra? Like, yeah, how are you guys sort of looking at investing in this kind of space?
Yeah, I mean, when the hype of AI was everyone's throwing stupid amounts of money at startups that had no real product and no revenue or business model. When that happens, typically I get scared and don't really participate in that madness and that hype,
Yeah,
right? So
that's
that's
fair.
not something for me. So I wait until hype dies down, things have clarified, and then I kind of go in and look into what's happening and then be like, okay, that's where we should be investing. Because I've never seen it work. Where you follow the hype, you're going to lose money for sure. Having said that, AI and LLMs, they're one of these transformational sort of investment, transformational points in history where you saw it where things moved to mobile and things, all the mobile apps and everything, things moved to cloud, and that was another transformational. Now it's just things have moved to AI. And so initially a lot of startups were pitching, we are an AI startup, and I was like, yeah, whatever, you're not, and they were just like a wrapper on ChatGPT, and it was literally just their customer service was ChatGPT. Like, you're not AI in any way, shape, or form. But what we've seen shift now is there's AI in almost every startup, even the most. It's just how are you utilizing that new tool set to make things better where you wouldn't have been able to before. And so we're investing in some interesting companies where they're using AI, where there's large data sets of unstructured data. They're taking them and then structuring it in a way that's useful for whoever needs it. So, for instance, one of the companies we've invested in is Metric. They're taking financial information and data from SMEs that don't have real financials, and they're turning it into real financials and not like a AI CFO for these companies. We have other companies that are using AI to support investment analysts like Chisel, investment analysts in the investment banking space, which is another really interesting space. So there's a lot of use cases now where AI is enabling startups to serve a problem that wasn't servable before. But we're not investing because it's an AI business. We're investing because it's a business that actually is solving a real problem and has a great customer base, and they're using AI as one of the tools to do that. And so that's kind of the way we look at the world.
Yeah.
And it's been working pretty well. There's a lot of companies that.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? AI is basically like oxygen, right? Or like electricity. You don't say, "Oh, I'm investing in an electricity company," or something like that. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous, right? And so on and so
It's just
forth.
part of the table stakes now.
Part of the table stakes, right? What I was interested in learning is obviously like a lot of these foundational models are coming from the West, right? There's Claude, there's obviously OpenAI, Meta has their own as well. There's also ones in China, for instance, DeepSeek and so on and so forth. Are there ones which are basically in MENA specific or Arabic language specific sort of LLMs? And do you think there's a need for that as well, or like what's happening there?
So there's a couple of people have trained open source things on Arabic language and generated different sorts of things. We've invested in a company called DX1. Their LLM has basically 24 different dialects of Arabic, understands written and spoken and do all that really cool stuff. And so there is definitely a need for Arabic focused sort of tools, but I don't think you have to build everything from scratch. I think there's a lot of great open source technologies that are out there that you could just train the model better and then it'll work really for what we need. So I don't think you need it from scratch. If you want to look one from scratch, there's the Falcon one in the UAE. There's a bunch of others that are out there, but yeah, there's a lot of alternatives to work on.
That's fair. So there's no kind of pain point there to solve. Basically, you just focus on the business. Building a business that returns money, right?
Yeah.
I was curious about obviously we planned to talk a few months ago actually, and a lot of it was happening, but still maybe the longer tail of that is going to take a few years to kind of see. But recently, a few months ago, Donald Trump basically went to the Gulf and did some big tech deals, right? I mean, the White House says it goes to almost like 2 trillion and so on and so forth, different numbers being thrown around. So like G42 and then PIF and then some of the other sort of, deals in Humane, I believe, as well in Saudi, got lots of chips and so on and so forth. So how do you see MENA as a region evolving in this kind of global AI race, so to speak, or ecosystem, so to speak? Like, yeah, is it, do you see any interesting development there as a result of those trade deals that happened and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think what's happened with those trade deals has been pretty intelligent. It's kind of positioning the MENA region ahead of a lot of the markets around the world. And the MENA region really is one of those markets where it's very, we're looking to do business, right? So that's really the big thing that's out there. And yeah, I think these are all going to have major positive impacts on the region as a whole. We'll have availability ahead of the rest of the world. So why not? I think these were really smart moves. And that's what I was talking about. Like 15 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any of these sort of transactions taking place because no one in the region cared about this. But now you're seeing the leadership in most of the markets across the region are paying very close attention to what's happening in technology, AI, and things around the world and playing a role at the forefront of all of that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. One of the other sort of remits that I guess the Trump administration has, and then it's kind of affecting global markets and kind of company valuations, is basically crypto as well. I think there's, because of the favorable regulations, it's just going up and up right now. So what kind of stuff are you guys seeing in the MENA region when it comes to crypto? Like, do you see any companies which are equivalent to like your Coinbases and so on and so forth? Or like, are you invested in some? Yeah. What's happening?
Yeah, so I previously invested in a company out of Bahrain called Rain. So Bahrain was one of the first markets in the region to set up a jurisdiction and legal structures for crypto in the region. And so quite a few of the exchanges, the centralized exchanges, are actually regulated here out of Bahrain, which is quite cool. So I invested in Rain, and they've done really well. They raised a lot of money, and they got some funding from Coinbase actually themselves, and Kleiner Perkins and a few others. So they've executed super well. It's still one of those things where, although there's a lot of interest in it, it's not region-wide. So Saudi, for instance, still is not completely structured for crypto. Kuwait also is another market where it's still a bit nascent on that front. UAE has taken the lead, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, with things related to crypto. Bahrain is quite active as well. But there's a lot of crap out there. So that's the thing you got to watch out for. So, it's one of
exactly. A lot of scams. And it's it is an evolving sort of landscape, right? So on and so forth. I was going to ask you this. So you obviously worked with a lot of founders in the region, and a lot of startups. What is the most common reason, or a few common reasons, that startups fail in MENA? Is it sort of market related, founder related? Like, do you see any sort of interesting patterns there?
I think there's two reasons. One is really the founders just can't execute or do anything. So that's been a big reason for failure. So they might have raised their first round and then just not executed and not done anything, and then it fails, right? The second reason is one that's been annoying for us, where the founders have executed really well, but there just isn't a funding ecosystem to support them. Maybe they're setting up something in deep tech where there's not a lot of deep tech investors, or they're investing in something strange, or they're setting up something that's weird, but there's a huge opportunity, but it's strange. So a lot of the VCs in the region have become they want to do a lot more copycat deals than they want to do really interesting new sort of ideas. And so they run out of cash, and then they shut down. And so it's most of the time startups fail because of things related to internally within the startup. So whether they've not executed well, the founders have had a fight, or whatever, like they just haven't figured out unit economics. But some of the times it is external factors. So with a lot of the situations that we've seen, great companies, great founders, good execution, but just no funding available for them.
Yeah, that makes sense, really. If you were to sort of make a prediction of the ecosystem for the next sort of decade, basically, where is MENA in the year, say 2040, basically? Paint me the picture, basically.
I don't know, but I have no clue. I wish I knew that I'd invest in all those startups now and I'll be making a lot of money. But in general, the region is on a trajectory that's growing really quickly. We're following the paths of a lot of emerging markets, but much faster in terms of how the ecosystems are evolving. And I think, I don't know, by 2040, I'll be retired and made a lot of money on great companies that we've invested in. But in general, I think we'll see a very thriving ecosystem, a lot more funding that's available, great founders, second, third time founders that are working on great companies. We'll hopefully see a decacorn or two, a lot of IPOs and public companies in the market that are tech related. So it'll be good. I think we're on a really good trajectory and there's a lot of growth there.
Yeah, that's brilliant, really. And last question, basically, to wrap things up. So what advice would you have for budding entrepreneurs who want to build like a generational company in the MENA sort of ecosystem?
I think just, get things done, start executing on stuff. Sometimes you see founders that are just focused on fundraising. They're like, the success is how much they've raised or what the valuation is that they raised that. That's not really a true measure of success. A true measure of success is, have you built a company that can thrive and survive regardless of VC funding or not? And so that's how you have to think about it. It's like, I'm going to build this company. If I get funding from VCs, great, I can accelerate it. If not, then I'm going to be able to continue to grow it regardless of what I have available to me. So I think that's the mindset that you need to have. I'm going to build something and I'm going to execute and get things done regardless of what obstacles will be in the way.
Yeah, I had a kind of mentor who used to say that ideas are looked up upon, but execution is worshipped. So yeah, so
mine is a bit more negative. It's like ideas are worthless.
Wow, yeah, that is taking it a bit further. But yeah, I can totally see great ideas not seeing a light of the day because of very poor execution, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure you see that a lot. But Hassan, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Hope you had fun as well. But thanks so much and all the best with the fun. Hope you get a 5x, 10x, 20x multiple return for your LPs,
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Hassan.
Thanks.